All right, fire away.
Brandon, you have made a point to try to fill all of your perceived needs in free agency when you go into a draft. This year, after trading Stefon, can you say that you've done that necessarily? And if not, how does that maybe impact your approach?
Yeah, fair question. I get that. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's, for his 4 years here was a number one role. So we have not filled a number one role. I would say we have a group of guys as we sit here today that we believe bring different skill sets. We like the group. Would we like to add to it at some point? Yes. But I'm not sitting here thinking we have a glaring hole. But I get the question. I get the perception. Sometimes you have young guys on your roster that you believe in as well that can ascend, but they have to prove it too. Just like last year we were getting the question about linebacker. Terrell Bernard had to prove it. Even Tyrell Dodson in his form when he played for us had to go prove it because he'd mainly been, a backup, prior to that.
Hey Brandon, what's sort of the range right now of first round grades on your guys' board?
Yeah, I mean, more than last year, but not 28.
Follow up on that, you've traded up several times in the first round. When you're at 28, when do you start plotting? Is it 15, 16, 17, somewhere in that range?
Yeah, good question. I'll take any call, Ryan. You know me. Next week, the phones start ringing all over the place. Teams that want to bail out of, I don't know if teams in the top 10 are calling us. I wouldn't expect that. But teams in the teens will start calling because maybe they got their eye on a couple guys, and if they don't get those, they would soon add something maybe, depending on what's on the board. We'll assess them all, have conversations, see who's on the board when their picks come up. And we'll be doing the same. We'll also be looking the other way. If we did not draft Dalton last year, I think I told you we had some options to go back, and one that I really liked that would have put us into the second round that would have added, I thought was good asset, to do that. So we'll do both ways. I think that's the best way, prepare for every scenario. We'll go through next week with the scouts the various scenarios that could happen and just play the board. Dalton was so close to us, and I really thought he was a good weapon for this offense. And it's one of those, right or wrong, I probably deserve criticism for trading up sometimes. I get that. But if there's a guy I like and I'm confident, I want to go to bed Thursday night that I got him. And if that happens again, I could do it. I can't really tell you whether we go up, go back, or draft at 28. I have no idea how it's going to fall.
Brandon, you said that teams in the top 10 aren't likely going to call you, but that doesn't preclude you from calling them, correct?
Yeah, there's no rule. I can call all the way to 1, John. Think they'll take my call? I haven't called them. Yeah.
Brandon, is there a value, how is the value put on future picks? Like if you were to trade the second round pick, it's 60, so there's a value. How do you and other teams, is there a general way it's looked at if you were doing anything, either obtaining picks or trading picks in the future?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question too. I would say you're generally going to say it's, you're looking at what team it is. So, but if you're not sure, if this team's a perennial playoff team, you're going to back it up a round. So if you wanted, like this year, let's say you wanted to take our second round pick out of the way. Say we made our first, it's in the second round, and we wanted a pick. Somebody's going to make us trade next year's one to do that. It's going to be a round difference. And that's where you'd have to decide, and if you're accepting someone's pick, if we're in the third round this year and someone offered, we don't have a third, but just pretend we had a third, and someone offered us next year's 2, part of what I may be thinking about is what kind of team, is this a perennial playoff team? Is it not? All those things. But in general, you're going to move it around up.
With you, we did the owners' meetings, and we talked about the disappointment of not getting the third round comp, but you did get the fourth round comp. You said you had to move some things and think differently. Since then, you added a second next year for Stefon. How much does that at least increase your ability, maybe this year even, to move around the board?
Yeah, I mean, they're all assets. They really are. You know, no matter what year you have them, you're allowed to trade, you know, picks 24, 25, and 26. Can't go beyond that at this point. So any of those that we acquire are always assets. And again, the main thing, you know, and our board's pretty well set. You know, there's still some conversations. We got to go through some mocks, which could tweak a guy here or there. But you know, you're just kind of reading the board, and if there's guys sticking out and you want to use an asset to go get it, you do it. But you know, I wouldn't say, hey, we're definitely going to trade the number 2 pick that we acquired. I wouldn't expect that, but I'm not saying we wouldn't either.
Brandon, what about next year's first? Are you comfortable or willing to include that in a package that potentially would move you up the board?
I mean, I'm never going to say no. I don't love trading future ones. You know, if you go back to when I got here, what we were trying to do, knowing that we were most likely going to be in the quarterback market if we found the right guy, was creating assets to not have to trade the next year's one. And so if it makes sense, John, I'll do it. But I don't love it. I just know that there were times in Carolina in some of my younger years where we did trade it, and I felt more times we were disappointed later that we did it. Like that player we got didn't put us all the way at the top. And then you get to the next year's draft, and you're going, we would have been picking 17th. And you go, look who we just could have had. And so it's easy today to put it on the credit card and say, don't worry about next year's one. But hopefully I'm still sitting here. I know how tough that is to do that. But listen, we did it for Stefon Diggs when we traded for him and set through that. If there's something that makes too much sense, heck yeah.
There's been a lot made about the depth and talent of this year's wide receiver class. How do you view that moving first round and on?
Yeah, I mean, there is depth. There's a lot of different style receivers from size, speed, quicks. Some have better hands. Some are not great rack. They got good hands, but you're probably not getting much. Some other ones maybe have less size, but if you can get the ball in their hands, they kind of turn into a little bit of a running back. So there's a lot of different. One of the things that people don't always know the full details on, though, is what are their mentals, what are their smarts, what are their habits, and those playing big. And our coaches and our scouts have really worked hard. The scouts for a while, but the coaches have really jumped in now, trying to quiz these guys either at their pro days, at privates, Zooms. Obviously, you've seen some of the names we've had in here. We have tried to go through that, and some have really tested out well. This guy, he's going to pick it up, and there's some others that we have some concerns about. And then there's medical. We just had the medical meeting, and so like every year, there's guys that pop up, and buyer beware. That doesn't mean you can't take them, but you may choose a player that someone else, from a scouting stance, maybe a little less than this guy, but this guy's a lot healthier than this player. Not a huge difference, but all those factors can happen when you turn the card in and make that final decision that we're not going to walk down here and share when you say, well, why didn't you choose this guy or this guy? I'm not going to, just those are some of the things that you don't know. I know there's a lot of stuff out there. Highlights are posted of guys. Man, this would be great to have this guy. But that's not the whole picture.
What role involvement, if any, would Josh have if you have a wide receiver in mind that you're looking at? And maybe go to him and say, how would you fit with this guy? Have you watched him at all? If you do that at all. And can he be a part of any meetings on a top 30 visit?
He can, if he's here, like this week, yeah, I mean, he just got here this week, but I'm not sure if he met any of the guys or not, Sal, to be honest with you. But yeah, he could do that. Josh loves the draft. Like, he loves the process. I mean, I think a lot of people do. It's made, all the mock simulators and all that stuff, and he loves that stuff. And so he loves to watch, now some of the stuff he may be watching is highlights, some of it's maybe cut-ups too. But yeah, he'll ask about, you like this guy or this guy, and he may go watch, and throw his 2 cents in. He hasn't done the extensive work that we have, but I love that he loves it and likes to hear how we see things.
Kind of going off of that, have you talked to Josh this week, recently, about any specific guys in the draft or any of that? And have you talked to him since trading Stefon?
I have talked to him since trading Steph. Yeah, he's talked to him this week. We talked on the phone at some point after we traded Steph that week, and then hadn't really, I think he went down to the Masters last week. Haven't really spoke to him much since then, but yeah, he's been in the building. He swung by my office, saw him upstairs in the offensive staff room yesterday, and same old guy. He's doing well and excited about the team, and it's good to see him back. He's I think he's excited about where we're at, and obviously knowing the draft's coming up. Like to Sal's question, ask, what are the guys you like? I see all these names. Who do you guys like?
You said with wide receiver you haven't necessarily filled that number one wide receiver role. How much of a priority is that? Like, you look at some of the young offenses around the league, Houston, Green Bay, that don't really necessarily have a bona fide number one, kind of spread it around, have some young talent they found day 2, day 3. Is that something that you definitely need in 2024?
No. I mean, listen, you'd love to have 2 guys out there that are number ones, you know what I mean? Or, you're always going to try to find the best players you can. No, what you need are guys that, in this offense, that are smart, versatile, selfless, and can make the plays that their skill set allows them to make. And if it's a tall guy that's going to, Josh is going to throw up a 50-50 ball, he's got to come down with it. If it's a guy that we want to get the ball in his hands, and when we need some rack, he's going to do that. I think that's what we're looking for. If there's a one that pops up either in free agency or draft that makes sense for us, or a really good 2, we'll do it. But I don't think having a 1 or not having a 1, Matt, doesn't mean we can't have success, on offense or as a team.
In that, along that line, was it more important as you reflect back to trading for Steph, was it more important for the offense's development to have a number one at that time, as opposed to now, where you know what Josh's capabilities are?
Yeah, I think Josh was I think he's still ascending, but I think there was more ascension that we were hoping to continue to see from him. I mean, he was, coming from rookie second year, we go losing Houston, and, that year we had added in 19, year 2 for Josh, we had added Cole and John Brown, who really, really helped our offense. But as the season went along and people saw how we were using them, I did feel like we needed someone else to offset what they were doing, because they were starting to try to figure out how to try to take them away. And I think that happened in that Houston game where we settled for field goals. Yes, we blew a lead, but I thought that game, if we could have got touchdowns in the first half, could have been over. And we let a team, that was more experienced than we were hang around. And so that was the impetus. What else can we get? I had, called on receivers, including Steph that year, but they weren't willing to trade him. And, we've at that point, Steph was available and thought that's what the offense needed at the time. But I do think, to your point, I think I get where you're at, John, is you're saying now that Josh is ascended to the player he is that a requirement? I don't think so.
And you're working with Joe and Bobby for the first time as coordinators. What kind of input have they provided, giving a whole scope instead of just their position groups?
Yeah, they've been great. I mean, two guys full of energy, loving the process. I mean, not all coaches love this process. They just want to get their playbook installed. Players these two guys, they're in my office asking questions, asking for more guys. How do we do this? And so, as we close in on the process, I'm going to continue, and I'll give them some assignments. Hey, sit with your position coach or your staff and look at these two guys or these three guys. We got them kind of similar. How do you guys see them? And then tell me how you would use them. And make sure we have them in the right order to how you're seeing them. But we've had a lot of conversations. They've obviously been very involved. Joe went out on the road some too to see some guys, from private standpoints, different positions. And he loved it, loves that process. So it's been fun, the first off season working with both these guys in their new roles.
You said goodbye to a lot of veteran players. Do you think that your team already is younger? Is there more opportunity if you make the right picks for a bunch of guys to make this team? What do you think?
I do. I think there's, like anything, change is not always bad. Change can be hard when you've had the stability we've had at some of the positions, and a lot of those guys, were captains. So, is that uneasy? Yeah, it is. But sometimes your team has to evolve. It's probably the best word I can do it. And we do feel there are some guys currently on the roster that can ascend into some leadership roles. Is it going to be where, the guys that left off? No, but hopefully we can grow them, and that's part of the development of our organization. And then, in this draft, what pieces can we add to come in and either, start? It's hard to start for a rookie, but start or be a key backup, help us on teams, and be a guy that we're going to count on, for sure in the future. And so, I think there's a lot of great opportunities, and I'm excited about where we're at, and I'm excited about the draft next week.
Brandon, does that influence your thinking at all, maybe, in the sense of, in the past years, 6th and 7th round picks here weren't making the team and were going other places, playing for other teams because they're getting claimed off of waivers. Knowing that maybe they have a bit better of a chance to make the roster this year, would that maybe influence how you consider, trading up and giving away some of those picks?
Yeah, it does, Jay. I mean, I think you never know how it's going to fall exactly, like you wish you had that crystal ball to say, all right, do I want to give this 5th round pick away? Well, tell me who's going to be there in the 5th. You never have that. So you do hope the board falls favorably for you to land some of the guys that we've been able to, Shakir, whoever else that fortunately fell to the 5th. So you do have to keep that in mind. And I do think, to your point, we have, some of the guys, I know both the 7th rounders got claimed last year. We've had some guys that we've drafted and hoped if they didn't make it, we could get them to a practice squad that didn't. I do think those guys may have a better chance this year if we select them.
In regards to wide receiver, how much weight does Josh's opinion have? Obviously, you have your staff, but in terms of how do you kind of balance that goes into the process?
Yeah, I mean, in fairness to Josh, you remember what I said as far as he doesn't know the medical, he doesn't know how smart they are per se. Now, he could probably ask a coach, it's more like the different skill sets, how would this guy, if we took this guy, how would he fit in the offense? Where would you put him? Would you line him up at X? Could he play F and Z? Then what would you do if he went inside? Who would you move outside? Some of those conversations. I think Josh is not trying to be, overstep and say something without having he just doesn't have all the answers to do that. But love his input, love his excitement for sure. And I'd be stupid to not include him and let him kind of see what some of these guys. And like I said, he was watching film last year. I know he's already been watching film this year, some of these guys, since he's been in here this week.
Of sub-package edge rushers. So you demand your defensive ends set the edge. You keep 5 guys at defensive ends active, sometimes only 4. A Bryce Huff type day 3 guy, my impression is there isn't a lot of room on your board for a smaller edge rusher who you are never going to want on the field on first down. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that depends on how many we would keep on the 53. So, you got to be careful how many DPRs that you put. But if the talent's there, Mark, we'd still take it and figure it out. We've had at least 1 year, maybe 2, where we've kept 6 ends. Now that player better help us on fourth down, like on special teams. Like he better wear multiple hats. But it could also be a guy that maybe you don't count on him right away unless you have injury, but you've got him in the bullpen ready to roll. If he can rush the passer, we know how important it's a passer league. I'm not just going to pass him up and say, well, it's not a good fit this year because maybe.
So there's some guys on the board.
Yes. Yeah.
You've done some work. You've done some work in free agency the last couple of years in May, June, but entering this draft with your defensive line, edge and or defensive tackle, how much priority is there in this draft to add somebody that can contribute as early as next season?
Would love to. I mean, I think there are guys in the draft that can do that. They can come in and maybe they're not day one starters where we're picking. If we took one in the first, we'd have to see what's there. Or if we took one later, I do think there's players though in more than just the first round that can come in either as a DT or a DN and help us in the rotation. And, we rotate our guys a lot anyway, so I don't get too caught up in, whether he's a starter or not. We run 8, 9 deep on game day as it is.
We haven't spoken with you since the Leal Collins move, and that's somebody who's got a lot of experience in this league. What do you envision his role on this team being?
Yeah, a veteran player, obviously missed a year. He had a late ACL. I think he got his right before the playoffs in I think it was late, maybe early January of that year, the previous season, just where his rehab was. He wasn't healthy. Remember, we worked him out, and he ended up signing with Dallas's practice squad. But he's a veteran. He's played tackle guard, and I would think he would come in and provide some depth at right tackle at least, and then also interior, I think, wherever we need depth, competition. So I would say right tackle and then, guard.
The depth of next year's draft impact some decisions that you make this year?
It's I'm not too worried about next year's. The depth of the draft is so hard to tell. With NIL, there's guys that we thought this year would come out, but the schools are really coming up with some pretty good money to keep these kids, giving them $600-700 guaranteed, for guys that like that, that guarantee. I got this. I don't have to go compete for this. It's mine. So we are seeing a changing landscape from that standpoint. There's definitely the last couple of years guys that we had pegged that even some of the schools thought they would probably lose. So, this was a light underclassmen, draft, and there's going to be more guys. But there are guys that have stayed in the COVID, that stayed and played 5 years, there's going to be some guys with more age on them that are still going to get drafted probably later in the, not that there won't be some early, but there's definitely a lot of 23, 24, maybe even 25-year-olds that are getting drafted because of COVID plus NIL. So not too crazy worried about next year's draft. It'll be fine. It's just really focused on the positions that we need to get answered between now and September, whether it's this draft or free agency afterwards, and then making sure we have depth in all the right spots.
How many top 30s did you use this year?
30.
As a follow-up to that, how often does a guy come in here and it's so impressive, you really move him up your board?
Yeah, there's some guys that maybe we had conflicting reports about the learns or the personality that we wanted to get around or verify. So, I mean, there's not a lot of those, but there are some that and maybe it's breaking a tie. I got a couple of guys here. I know maybe they're like this. I'm just making up a round in the second round. And I already know this guy can learn, and they've got the same skill set, but this one I'm unsure of. I get this guy in here, and I'm like, yeah, he's not quite the same learner. Maybe if the draft falls and they're both there, they're the highest on the board, I take this guy. If not, as long as I'm still comfortable that it's above the bar learning. Now, sometimes you bring a guy in here, and you're just like, this guy's going to mentally struggle to play the position that we would need him to play, and we can't take him in the second round. We need to drop him some, but he's going to be more of a project.
I know you talked about, I'm sorry, I know you talked about Josh and his interest, but he doesn't know everything about these young players. But he does know Steph. When you said you talked to him before the trade, I was just curious, like, that's almost like a philosophical change. He's been their #1 receiver. What was his reaction when he knew that this was the possibility? And because it is a major change to a guy he's known and had a lot of success with.
Yeah, I'm going to keep that between me and Josh. I get the question, but I think that's best for our conversation to keep that in. Josh understands that sometimes I'm calling him, take Steph out with decisions, whether it's calling him the year we signed Mitch when he didn't really know Mitch and, hey, probably won't be able to bring Matt Barkley back. Like, things like that. People he's formed a relationship with. Obviously has a relationship with Steph. Josh is really mature and understands that sometimes I'm calling him about things to say, how do you see it? Sometimes I'm calling him just to say, hey, this is where we're at. I don't want you to be blindsided, things like that. I'm not really going to weigh into where the conversation with Steph. I just think it needs to be kept between me and Josh, just out of respect.
About your boundary corner room, Brandon.
Said no, so.
Thank you. How do you feel about your boundary corner room? And specifically, how would that change based on how you might feel where Kyer is right now?
Yeah, we feel good. We got good competition. Kyer's back. I haven't really talked to him, but saw him in the hallway yesterday or day before. And Christian Benford, obviously Rasul's back, and Jamarcus Ingram. So no, we've got some guys. If you just start with those four that know our system, know the expectations, and they'll be looking to compete. So no, I think we got guys that can line up and that we believe in.
Any updates on Micah? When we talked to in Orlando, the door was open, but still kind of weighing options. Have you heard anything new since then?
Yeah, I talked to Micah yesterday. It was good to see him. We FaceTimed for a little bit, living that California life that he is. But he's the best. Can't get enough of Micah Hyde. Just his energy. You forget when you're away from someone, but just he's got that infectious smile. Some people see the world half glass empty. He sees it not half full. He sees it 100% full. And just I wish I woke up every day with the perspective he's got. He's just such a good dude. Can see everything, mature beyond most players' years. And so we had a great conversation about life and things like that. I don't think he has totally made a 100% decision either way. I didn't get into him, hey, are you 95% leaning one way or the other? Didn't push it. We just checking on him. He's checking on how things. I know he talked about his softball deal. He's going to be here. He's excited to come back, next month after the draft and be around the guys, and he was pumped about that. But I can't tell you if he's going to play again or not. I don't have that concrete answer.
Another Iowa kid, Cooper DeJean, one of the more interesting prospects in this draft. A lot of conversation about whether he's a safety or a corner. How do you view him, and how does that impact a player that you're evaluating when there is a little bit of work that you have to do on what he's going to be and project to the next level?
Yeah, really good player. Had a really fun career to watch his play. I think he came into Iowa originally as a safety, and then they moved him to corner. Just his talent can play it. I think he's one of those guys that wherever he goes, they'll figure out the best spot for him. I could see some teams, Matt, saying maybe they got a bigger hole at safety, let's put him over there. Or, hey, this guy can, we're going to pop him in a corner. He showed he could do it in college. We'll do it here. I mean, he also adds to your return game. He's a pretty good returner and good ball skills, things like that. So it was a joy we met him at the Combine, but it was a joy to have him here. You can talk a little bit longer to him. Obviously, he was coming off the injury, so he just did his pro day last maybe Monday or so. So he's still coming from that. He didn't have a full time to train, but thought he did a good job in his pro day.
Brandon, whether it's NIL or COVID or just the more easy it is to transfer in college, it seems like there are more guys that have played multiple years in different programs, maybe even 3 different programs.
Yeah.
How does that change the workload of evaluating those players?
Yeah, Thad, I think sometimes you're talking about, in the old days, you got a scout who's in the Southeast. He's been there for 5-10 years. He knew who this kid was all the way along. So you're kind of connecting dots. Guy transfers, I'm making up a school, from Florida to USC. This scout's going to give this guy a little heads up. This is the background that I've been tracking this kid. This is the background that this school saw him. May want to start with your questions at this school when it's time for him to come out like that. So you're and you're right, there's guys that are 3 schools. So they're bouncing around. It's really becoming to college football right now. Major college football is becoming into a bunch of 1-year deals. These coaches are having to, I've talked to enough coaches, and they're as worried. They're hitting the portal, but they're trying to re-recruit their own guys back. That you just assume probably as a fan this guy will be back, but that's not the case with NIL if someone else offers them. But yeah, it's up to our scouts to kind of connect the dots, and then as we get to know them, Thad, we'll ask them questions. Why'd you leave? The example I gave you, Florida. What made you go to USC? Well, I wanted to play with this guy, or this coach he recruited me. He left, and this new coach didn't really see me the same way. There's all sorts of stories. Obviously, money talks too. That's this day and age. That's usually the leading reason that I'm finding. But we do like to ask. And was it because you lost out of competition? Coaching changes. There's so many variables.
Can you give us an update on just a few guys here? Matt Milano, Tommy Doyle, and Von Miller, and where they stand right now. Are any of them working out here? Where are they?
Yeah, the two. Yeah, they're all here rehabbing. I mean, Von's not. Von's healthy, but yeah, he's good. But Tommy Doyle is still rehabbing. Matt's still working through his deal, and they're here.
Brandon, is there always a steep drop between round 1 graded guys and then whatever the next tier you refer to it as?
You talking about like round 2?
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming it's round 2, but I don't want to just assume that, and that would be the name.
Yeah, no, there.
Round 1, and you go with the next. Is it always a cliff?
No, it's not. There's a lot. It's a tick, but there are some things that we say he's got to check all these boxes to get our first round grade. And again, there's going to be 32 players selected in the first round. but it doesn't mean they all come out of your first round. Sometimes you do have to dig into your second round, just how it falls. But yeah, it's not a huge thing. It may be, maybe he doesn't, maybe he just doesn't have measurables that across the league have shown, Pro Bowl elite success, or, you know what I mean? He's an exception player, or maybe he just doesn't have the production. Like, I see all the skills, but it's usually not much but there's just something that you're going, I really like this player a lot. I think he's going to be great. There's one box he didn't check, so we're going to put him just below here. And then that's kind of, I still think there's a gap. There's a bigger gap from the top of 2 to the bottom of 2 than just across the line of bottom 1, top 2. Does that make sense?
How do you view your running back room right now, and do you feel the need to add more of a power type back to complement the book? Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. No, you go ahead. Elaine has been trying. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask about your running back room, how you view that, and the possible need to add more of a power type back to complement James Cook.
Yeah, I get the question. We're excited about James being back. Ty Johnson thought he did really good in his role as the season progressed. And you're right. We had Latavius. We had signed Damian Harris last year before he got hurt, who played some bigger backs. So I think that probably makes sense. But at the same time, we're gonna try to find the most talented player too, and we'll make it work if it doesn't end up being the ideal 220 plus back. But fair point.
I was just curious, last month you talked about how hadn't really had conversations about Greg's fifth-year option yet. Has anything changed there? Anything official or anything?
Nothing official. Really, as soon as I get done with the draft, that'll be first on the docket for sure.
When you guys get into your meetings, which scout is the most entertaining and how he presents a player?
Most entertaining, man, Ryan. That's a great question. I had to send them home because we always about kill each other, and it gets. It was funny. I'll tell you a quick story. These guys will probably hate me, but of course I'm egging it on. But there was a conversation between Mike Szabo, who's one of our national scouts, and Lake Dawson, and it was about toughness. And they were getting into an argument, well, I don't think that's tough. And they were going, well, toughness to me is, and it went on. And so they went home after that, and I was like, hey, are you guys riding together? Because they carpool. And so we laughed, and it was like, ha-ha, funny, but not funny. It was that time of the day. So the next day we go into the bathroom, and I walk in, and one of the young guys, Jay, was walking behind me. I said, what? So Mike and Lake went into the bathroom, and so Jay was behind me. I said, Jay, just stand at the door. And I told him, these guys were about to go to the restroom, and I said, hey, guys, did you guys figure out toughness? If not, you're not getting out of this room until we figure it out. So they were bad at me for they were like, you're ridiculous. But no, one of the scouts said we're going to bring up boxing gloves anytime that happens again. But no, just a good group of guys. They bring different personalities. Very passionate. Some of them are super passionate, like they've done the work, and it can get heated, but no, all good guys. They all bring kind of a different energy.
Last one. Just another lighter question. Like, a lot of players will be superstitious before a game. Is there any superstitions you have or you like to do before the draft?
We always take our picture at the same time. Isn't that cool?